Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at round number 2 of the Marshall Chess Club Labor Day Invitational being held in New York City. Now, the famous YouTuber and aspiring Grandmaster Levy Rozman, also known as Gotham Chess, is competing. Yesterday in round number 1, he suffered a very difficult loss with the white piece to one of the strongest players in the event, a Grandmaster. But today, he is back playing with the black pieces against the player James Chirilov, who I believe is a FIDE master. Now, you're probably thinking, who is James Chirilov? Now, before the game, when I saw the pairings, I had no idea who Levy's opponent was, but as it turns out, his opponent is actually a streamer who goes by the name of Chess Brainiac. This is a player that I have played against many times online, and additionally, this is a kid who I think has had a blitz rating at or around 3,000 on 1 or 2 occasions, so he is no slouch, despite only having a classical rating of 2339. All right, so Levy is the black pieces. Let's jump right into the action. So the game starts out with the move e4, and now we get the move c6 from Levy. We have the move d4, and he plays d5. Here we get e5, bishop f5, and now we have the move h4. Now in this position, Levy decides to play the move a6. Now I believe in one of the previous Norm events in New York City, Levy played this move h5, if I'm not mistaken. One of the drawbacks I've said a few times already in some of my other videos with playing the Caro-Kann is that very quickly, white is the one who has the choices, and black is limited in options. Now, having studied this opening from both the white side and the black side at the top level, I can tell you that generally speaking, the only 2 moves that are considered to be reasonably decent for black here are the moves h5 or h6. But when you look at the level that Levy is competing at, which is around IM level, 2400, let's just say 2500-ish, generally you don't have to be super precise, and in some cases, almost better to play something a little bit dubious to take your opponent out of their preparation, because then they won't be able to play all the moves instantly. So, Levy decides to play the move a6 here. This move is considered to be a little bit dubious. You will note that the bar jumps quite a bit after this move, but as I just reiterated, the bar isn't really the most important thing at the moment. So, we got the move h5 here being played by Chirilov, and now Levy plays the move c5, trying to open up the center of the board. Here, Chirilov plays pawn takes pawn, and now Levy plays this move knight c6. Now, one thing that I really like about this choice from Levy is that he is playing on the human element. As I said before, you see the eval bar, you think 0.5, white's much better, what is Levy doing? He's an idiot. But in fact, humans are not able to play at a 3700 level like Stockfish or Leela or the other top computer programs. And when you have to play as a human without having memorization or knowing the exact moves, it isn't quite so easy. And I can say that myself because when I try to play like Stockfish, I'm nowhere near that level, and I'm one of the top players in the world. So, after knight c6, we get knight f3, Levy plays move e6, and now we have the move bishop to e3. Now, this is actually very similar to another system, which I believe is the Botvinnik Karl's defense within the Caro-Kann, which is a system with 3c5, where after takes, black tries to go something like knight c6, knight f3, and then a move like bishop f5, followed by e6, or even e6 right away. Now, the big difference when you compare this current position that we have here after e6 and bishop e3 is that white has pushed this pawn all the way up to h5. Now, this could be a strength, but it also could be a long-term weakness. So, Levy goes bishop g4, and now we get the move c3 being played here by Chirilov, and now we have the move knight takes pawn on e5. Now, here the game continues with knight bd2. If white were to play queen to a4 check, black can simply block with the queen. The knight guards the bishop and the queen at the same time, and after the trade here, white can probably play b4, but after a move like h6 and knight to f6, suddenly this pawn on h5 is a very serious weakness for the player with the white pieces. So, after knight takes e5, Chirilov plays the move knight bd2, and now we get the move knight to f6, and here we have the move h6 being played. Now, I really like what Chirilov is doing here. He's trying to get rid of this weakness while creating some targets on the king side to attack if black decides to play a move like g6, where down the road there could be some dark square weaknesses. So, Levy takes on h6, and now we get the move queen to a4 check, and here Levy plays knight ed7. Now, one of the problems with the position, and I don't know what Levy was thinking specifically because he hasn't done a recap, nor have I spoken to him, is he probably thought he could play the move queen d7, but shockingly after queen d7, white is simply winning on the spot with this move queen to d4 because suddenly there's so much pressure on all these diagonals, and black is just lost. If you play bishop takes knight, I take the horse, and now both the horse and the bishop are hanging here. You'll lose a piece and the game. And if you play the move knight to, let's just say c6, you hang the horse on f6. And then if you trade the knights, I take with the pawn, and you have the same issue here where your bishop and your knight are both hanging at the same time. So suddenly you lose on the spot, which means that Levy has to play the move knight ed7 instead, which is definitely not what he wants to do here, because now white can go knight to e5, we get bishop f5, and we have the move g4 being played. Now here, Levy decides to play the move bishop c2 after quite a bit of a think, and this is a move that I really like in the position, but I think that if we look at the game as a whole from a time management standpoint, this is one of the moves where I think Levy used a little bit too much time. I think it's probably a situation where he should have used 1 or 2 minutes and simply decided between bishop c2 or bishop g6, but make that decision a little bit quicker. Another reason that I mentioned this is that at the start of the video, I mentioned how Levy's opponent, James Chirilov, is known as Chess Brainiac online, and he has had a blitz rating near 3,000. I don't know if Levy was aware of his opponent or his online prowess, but if he did know this, it's very important to keep in mind that one of the big advantages that Levy normally has is if he gets into a time scramble, he's the favorite. In this case, he is actually the underdog because he's playing a younger kid who has a much higher rating online. So, Levy goes bishop c2, we get queen takes bishop, and now he plays knight takes knight, and here we get the move f3. Now Levy plays move queen c7, trying to pressure the pawn on c5. Now this is a very, very complex game here. Both players are violating some of the basic rules here. First of all, you'll notice that Levy's king side is very open. He doesn't really want to castle the queen side. White also has created some weaknesses. He can't really castle the king side. And here, after we get the move b4, now it's very double-edged because White is struggling to castle his king, so is Black, and it's very, very complex. Now, keeping in mind that Levy lost first game, this is probably the type of position that he wants because he needs to win this game to sort of get back in the hunt to try and go after a Grandmaster norm. So, Levy plays a5 here, and now we get this move queen a4, and this is a move that's a mistake from a general standpoint, but it's a move that I can't be super critical over because in this position, when you look at this, the move that I probably would play is move like bishop b5, and let's just say Black goes knight c6, for example. You can play the move knight to b3, and after takes, the idea is that White can simply slide the king to f2 and then bring the rooks to the center of the board, maybe play knight d4. It's very, very choppy, very double-edged, very hard to come up with clear-cut plans for either side, but this would have been the best approach. Instead, Chirilov plays move queen a4, Levy plays move knight d7, blocking the check, and now we get the move castles. Now, this is a severe mistake from Chirilov, but it's a move that makes a lot of sense from the human perspective. If you're looking at this, it's very awkward to put a king on f2. Yesterday, when Levy played his first round game, there was a situation where the computer wanted White to go king f2 from g1. This is another situation where White should probably leave the king in the center of the board with king f2 and some variation of this, but as a human, you want to castle a king out of the middle of the board. So, Chirilov decides to castle queenside. Now Levy goes bishop g7. Black cannot take the pawn on b4 because then you would simply hang the rook on a8 and lose the game. So, we get bishop g7 from Levy. He's desperate to castle his king out and then try to attack on either the c file or the a file. So, Chirilov plays knight b3, and now Levy castles here, and we get this move b takes a5. Now, it's very clear to me, and it's especially clear as I was watching the game live, that this was going down to the wire with the time scramble. Now, one of the themes that I mentioned yesterday as well is when you're getting towards the end of the game, both players are getting low on time, the situation for where one player is easier moves than the other player, that makes it easier to play, and it tends to be sort of a sign that things could go badly for the player who's going to have to use more time. And in this case, it's very clear that White's plans are much easier than Black's plans, and Levy is down 3 minutes on the clock here. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that here, Levy has to find a way to open up the A, B, or C files here, whereas White simply wants to take the pawn on h6, play g5, and attack. So just to illustrate the point, ignore the evaluation bar, of course. White wants to get something like this, and then go like queen h4, or maybe bishop d3. White immediately wants to go for the kill on the king side against the Black king on g8. For Levy, it's not quite so simple because he has to open up the queen side, but it's not concrete. So, Levy uses a bit of time here before playing the move b6, a minute and a half. Now, I'm a big fan of his time usage. This is a good move. He plays it relatively quickly and with confidence, and as you can tell from the evaluation bar, this is, in fact, the best move in the position. So after Levy plays b6, we now get this move bishop takes h6, and this is a serious mistake that is played by James Chirilov here. Now, White has 5 extra minutes. He uses all that time before taking the pawn. The computer thinks that this move is effectively a losing decision, but as I was watching the game live and I was looking at it without the engine lines, I actually expected bishop takes h6 to be played. Now, the reason I expected it to be played is because when you look at the queen side here, you see this open A file, you see the C file opening, potentially even the B file opening. Your king is very, very weak on the C1 square. So if your king is very weak, what will you try to do? You'll try to attack and checkmate the black king on the king side as quickly as possible. Now, the computer here says that after the move c6, black is actually not really much better here. Probably the reason Chirilov did not play this is he probably thought pawn takes pawn, and now white can't take the horse because after queen c3, king b1, and queen takes e3, the black king is snug as a bug on g8. You have pawns, you have a bishop, a knight. This king is super, super safe with all the protection around it. So Chirilov probably thought pawn takes pawn. Now the knight's going to b6. There might be knight e5 here. My attack is too slow. So if you think your attack is too slow here, or not your attack, if you think the attack is too slow, you want to try and go for it immediately. You don't want to play extra moves. You just want to tunnel on the plan and go for it. So Chirilov plays the move bishop takes h6. Now, it's a very important moment in the game here, reiterating the point of easy moves versus hard moves. Because in this position, Levy is actually winning here if he plays the correct line, but it's very difficult with only 8 minutes on the clock to figure out what to do. Because first of all, when you look at this position, the line the computer likes, by the way, we'll get into it, is to take and play this move pawn takes pawn. But playing this is somewhat insane in my opinion, because after g5 here, if you move the knight to e8 just from a glance, you can see there's a move like queen h4. It suddenly looks like you're getting mated on the king side. Computer says after knight e5, I guess somehow after takes, knight g6, queen h6, and c4. Okay. For a 3700 computer, this is fine for black, but for a human to find knight e5 and knight g6 with only 8 minutes on the clock, I frankly think this is too difficult. I'm not even sure I would find this move in such a position. So the problem here is that when you see these ideas like g5, you see the immediate attack for your opponent, it feels like you can't take this pawn on c5 because it's going to be a little bit too slow. But if you can't do that, then what exactly are you supposed to do? And this is where Levy spends a bit of time. He ends up, or not this move, sorry, next move. He ends up playing this move knight takes c5 right away, and this is a big mistake. But if Levy knows that he's winning here, let's say he could see the eval bar, he probably spends a bit of time and tries to figure it out. But at this moment, it's just too difficult because white's moves, in my opinion, are a little bit too easy. Now, bear in mind, if Levy had 20 minutes on the clock here to think, I have no doubt in my mind that he probably would have spotted this line with pawn takes pawn. And after g5, he would have seen the move c4 here, slamming the door shut on the queen swinging over to the king side. But also if white takes the horse, now you have this move queen to f4, checking the king here on c1 and winning the rook on h6, and black will win the game. But from a distance, it's very, very hard to do this. And Levy basically trusts his instinct, and he plays the natural move, which is knight takes pawn. Now, this move is very, very natural here from Levy. It's a move that I expected, because what you're doing here is you're immediately opening up the c-file. You're immediately putting pressure on the knight and the queen here, and it just looks like everything's going to open up in your favor. Unfortunately here, for Levy, his opponent James Chirilov finds this move queen d4, and now the pendulum goes completely in the wrong direction because now Levy suddenly was surprised and he has to figure out what to do. Now, what do I mean by he's surprised? The big issue here for black is that suddenly there's a massive threat. Let's just say you take and play rook takes a5. White can take the bishop here, and if you take after g5, suddenly the horse is pinned and you're getting checkmated on the king side. So then you probably start thinking to yourself, and of course I have not seen what Levy has said, you probably start thinking, well, after takes, maybe I can go rook to a8 here. But if you play rook a8, after takes, rook a1, king d2, and rook a2 here, white can simply hide the king on e3. If white were to go king to e1, suddenly there's a queen g3 checkmate, and black wins the game. But after king to e3, if you trade the... not rook c1, sorry. If you trade the rooks on d1, suddenly the pawn on c3 is guarded by the bishop. The bishop also covers the e5 square, and white simply has 2 extra b's here and wins the game very quickly. So then you probably start thinking, well, wait, well, maybe I can trade, take bishop g7 and play something like e5 here. But after queen d2, it still is a complete mess, and if you don't see a way to win immediately, you're probably going to be losing because your king is so weak on g8. So it's a very unpleasant situation here for Levy because no doubt he was surprised by the move queen d4, and now white's moves all become like clockwork. They all become too easy. After e5, we get queen to d2, and now the queen guards the pawn on c3, but suddenly there are all kinds of threats like queen g5. Let's just say black were to go b5. Now you can trade here, and after queen to h6, king g8, suddenly you've checked, king h8, queen takes knight, and white wins the game. So all of a sudden, for Levy, everything's going the wrong direction. He's going to have to spend a ton of time, which he doesn't have at this point, to try and come up with a magical mate on the a file or try to defend the position. And because white really only has one option in the situation, it's very clear that unless Levy is able to pull a rabbit out of his hat, he is going to lose the game. So Levy here plays move knight to e6. Computer, of course, says you can go rook fc8 here, and after takes, check, king g8, if the queen g5, I think you have king f8 here, and now somehow after takes, knight b3, and king b1, you can play the move queen takes c3, and the game is going to end by a draw and repetition. After, say, takes, king, or not, sorry, wrong check. I think you go queen h6, king e7, queen g5 here, and white simply has too many checks, like bishop b5, rook d5, and so probably both sides should repeat the moves, and it will end peacefully. But with 50 seconds on the clock, of course, that's never going to happen, so Levy plays the move knight to e6. Here, Chirilov trades the bishops, and now he finds the best move, which is rook h6. Now, it's a great pity for Levy that there really are no other moves for white here. You're not going to take the pawn on b6, because after takes, suddenly all the files are open here on the queen side. You can't go queen h6 either, because of queen takes c3 here. So with no other moves, rook h6 is not a difficult move to spot. And now the game starts turning around here, because the knight is under pressure. If you move the knight away, now you lose the pawn on b6. There's even a move like bishop d3 here, and suddenly the black king is getting checkmated. So Levy decides to play b takes a5 out of desperation here, sacking the horse on f6, but unfortunately, after a4, knight a1, Levy plays move queen e7, and we get this move rook b6, and now black is simply missing a piece, this bishop on f1. There's no real threat on the queen side here. The white king is very, very stable and safe, and it's basically over, especially when you consider the time situation and the lack of an attack. So Levy fights on with rook b8. We get the trade of the rooks. White goes knight c2 here. A nice move, stopping the queen to a3 check. Levy plays queen b7. We get takes, queen b2. And now after king to d2, the white king is effectively very safe on the d file. If king guards knight, you can block with the bishop. And already here, Levy could resign, but he plays a few more moves before ending the game. So we get knight to e6 here. Chirilov plays bishop d3, really the last move. If white were to play, say, bishop c4, after rook to d8, pinning the queen on d5 here, black will win the queen and the game. So Chirilov plays bishop d3. Levy goes knight to f4 here. Levy could have played the move rook to d8, but after queen takes e5, there simply are no squares for the horse to jump to, and the white king, the bishop, the knight, and the rook are all very, very secure here. You could go queen a2, for example, but after a move like rook to h1, white is simply going to be crashing through eventually on the king side here with, say, queen f5 or rook h7 down the road. So Levy goes knight to f4, and now Chirilov, true to form, being a great online player, spots the tactic that finishes the game. He sacks the bishop with bishop takes h7 here. Levy now goes king f8, just to show a couple of lines. If Levy were to take the bishop after check, king h8, there's simply rook h1, knight h5, rook takes h5 mate. And if you go king h6, check, king g5, then there's queen to f5 checkmate. If you were to go king h8 here, white simply takes the pawn, and after king takes bishop, there's rook h1 check. If you go back, mate in 1, and if you go here, there's check, here, check, king f8, and then queen takes f7, and it's game over as well. So Levy decides to play the move king to f8 here, and now Chirilov plays the move queen to d6. Levy goes king e8, and after the move queen takes e5, Levy Rozman resigns the game against James Chirilov, and he suffers a very difficult second loss in a row in this event. Now, in this game, unlike the first game, I would say that Levy was not outclassed. He was not worse from the opening, but it seemed as though his time usage was not wonderful, and the game simply spiraled a little bit too out of control. It became a little bit too complicated as the players were getting low on time, and also, this is something you can't control in the game of chess, but his opponent's moves with the kingside attack became a lot easier than Levy's moves, and Levy's reactions weren't great. So even though I think Levy is a really strong tactical player, I think that if he's getting into time scrambles or the players are heading towards lower time, he should be looking more for ways to simplify and play a little bit more positional, especially when it relates to, say, grandmasters or kids who are very strong in online chess, because it seemed that he just wasn't quite there, couldn't quite sense the position. I mean, to be fair, b takes c5 was a very, very difficult move. I'm not sure I would have played that either. I think knight takes c5 was the human move. It was instinctively what makes the most sense. Unfortunately, after queen d4, it was bad. But I would say this game, at least Levy had some chances, but at the end of the day, it seems his time usage, the decisions he's making, and also the type of moves that he's having to find are a lot more difficult in these first two rounds. So, a very difficult second game for Levy. He loses his second in a row. It seems, I would say, all but over in terms of a GM norm. But as I said yesterday, for Levy, if he can win a game here or there, build some confidence, he might be able to gain some rating points back, hopefully stop the damage or stop the bleeding at some point, and get some nice victories in the remaining 7 rounds. So, A very tough loss for Levy, tough start, 0 out of 2, but there's 7 more rounds to go. So I hope you guys enjoyed this recap from the second round of the Marshall Chess Club Labor Day Invitational being held in New York City. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and I'll be back with another recap after Levy's third round game in a couple of hours. See you guys soon. Bye.